She told me I wasn't welcome at my own son's anniversary party. I smiled and stayed quiet, but what I uncovered next destroyed their perfect celebration and exposed a secret that shattered two families. I'm grateful you're here with me today. Stay until the end to see how this unfolds, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story reaches. At 70 years old, I thought I'd earned the right to be treated with dignity, especially by my own family. I thought the sacrifices I'd made, the years of hard work and devotion, would count for something. I thought my son would always be proud to have me by his side. But standing in Desmond's living room that Tuesday afternoon in late September, watching his wife Clarissa fuss over seating arrangements for their upcoming 10th anniversary party, I realized how completely wrong I was. The afternoon sun streamed through their floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating their perfectly decorated home in the Meadowbrook Hills subdivision. Everything about their house screamed success and sophistication, from the Italian marble floors to the original artwork on the walls. It was a far cry from the cramped two-bedroom apartment where I'd raised Desmond alone after his father, my beloved Jerome, had died in a construction accident when Desmond was only 7 years old. "The caterers from Belmont's confirmed for 50 guests," Clarissa said, her manicured fingers scrolling through her phone without once looking up at me. "Everything needs to be absolutely perfect. Desmond's new boss, Mr. Thornfield, will be there, along with several major clients from Hartwick and Associates. This party could make or break Desmond's chances at making partner next year." I nodded quietly, carefully arranging the fresh dahlias and roses I'd brought from my small garden into the crystal vase on their fireplace mantel. I'd grown those flowers myself, tending to them every morning before the sun got too hot, choosing the most beautiful blooms to bring to my daughter-in-law. "It sounds absolutely wonderful, sweetheart. What time should I arrive on Saturday? Should I bring anything special? I could make my famous peach cobbler. Desmond has always loved it since he was a little boy." Clarissa's fingers stopped moving across her screen. She looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between pity and annoyance. Her perfectly styled auburn hair didn't move as she tilted her head slightly. "Actually, Eleanor, we need to talk about that." Something cold and heavy settled in my stomach. I felt my hands begin to tremble slightly as I adjusted the last rose in the arrangement. "Talk about what, dear?" "The party." She set her phone down on the white leather sofa and folded her hands in her lap with the practiced composure of someone who'd rehearsed this conversation. "Desmond and I have decided to keep the guest list very intimate, just close friends and business associates, people from the firm, clients, and family from my side. You know how it is with these corporate events." I stared at her, certain I must have misheard. My hearing wasn't what it used to be, after all. Maybe I'd gotten confused. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I don't think I understand. Are you saying I'm not invited to my own son's anniversary celebration?" "It's not personal, Eleanor," she said quickly, though everything about her tone suggested it was deeply personal. "We're just trying to maintain a certain atmosphere for the evening. Professional, sophisticated, elegant. The guest list has been very carefully curated to make the right impression on the people who matter most to Desmond's career." "Curated." I repeated the word, slowly, tasting its bitterness. "Clarissa, I'm Desmond's mother. I raised him by myself after his father died. I'm family." "And we love you. Of course we do." She stood up from the sofa, smoothing her designer dress, a cream-colored silk number that probably cost more than my entire month's rent. "But let's be honest with each other, Eleanor. You don't really fit in with the crowd we're trying to impress. Your stories about the old days in Riverside, the way you dress, your manner of speaking. Mr. Thornfield is extremely particular about image and presentation. He believes that a lawyer's personal life reflects their professional judgment. Everything matters. Every detail counts." Each word was like a small knife, carefully and deliberately placed to cause maximum damage. I felt my hands beginning to tremble more noticeably now, so I clasped them together tightly in front of me, trying to maintain my composure. "Does Desmond know about this decision? Have you discussed this with my son?" It was his idea, actually. Clarissa's smile was sympathetic in that particular way that made everything so much worse. The kind of smile you'd give to a confused elderly person who didn't understand how the modern world worked. He's under tremendous pressure at the firm right now, Eleanor. The partners are watching his every move. He can't afford anything or anyone that might raise the wrong impression or questions about his background. I heard footsteps on the hardwood stairs and turned to see Desmond descending from the second floor, his tie loosened after what I assumed had been a long day at Hartwick and Associates. My son, 35 years old now, a successful corporate attorney specializing in mergers and acquisitions, looking so heartbreakingly much like his father had at that age. The same strong jawline, the same intelligent eyes, the same way he carried himself with quiet confidence. When he saw my face, when he saw the hurt I was trying so hard to hide, he had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Mom," he said carefully, pausing on the bottom step, "Clarissa told you about the party arrangements?"
She told me I'm not welcome at my own son's 10th anniversary celebration, I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady and calm. She said it was your idea, Desmond. Desmond exchanged a long look with his wife, some kind of silent communication passing between them that I couldn't decipher. Then he walked into the living room, loosening his tie completely and draping it over the back of a chair. "It's complicated, Mom. This party is really important for my career trajectory. Mr. Thornfield, my boss, he's very traditional in his views, very focused on image and presentation, and maintaining certain standards. The firm has a reputation to uphold. And I don't uphold that reputation?" The hurt in my voice was unmistakable now, bleeding through despite my best efforts to contain it. "I'm not good enough to be seen at your anniversary party?" "You're wonderful, Mom. You know I think you're wonderful." But the words felt hollow, rehearsed, like something he'd practiced saying in front of a mirror. "You're just different from Clarissa's family. Her parents, Richard and Patricia, they have this natural polish, this instinctive way of moving in these social circles. They know which fork to use, which wines to order, how to make small talk with senior partners and major clients. You know how you sometimes tell those long stories about when I was a kid, or about Dad before he passed away? About the old neighborhood and your friends from the factory? It's sweet, it really is. But it's not exactly the kind of conversation that impresses corporate attorneys and their wives. But it's embarrassing," I finished for him, the realization settling over me like a heavy blanket. "Having a working-class mother who raised you alone in a 2-bedroom apartment after your father died in a construction accident is embarrassing to you now. Having a mother who worked double shifts at the textile factory and cleaned office buildings at night to pay for your education is something you want to hide? That's not what I'm saying, Mom. Please don't twist my words." But the flush creeping up his neck and into his cheeks told me it was exactly what he was saying, even if he couldn't admit it out loud. Clarissa stepped closer to Desmond, her hand resting possessively on his arm, in a gesture that seemed calculated to show unity and present a united front against me. "Eleanor, we're really not trying to hurt you. I hope you understand that. We're trying to build something important here. Desmond is being considered for junior partner next year. If he makes partner before he turns 40, he'll be one of the youngest in the firm's history. Everything we do right now matters tremendously. Every impression we make counts. Every social interaction is being evaluated and judged." "I see." I picked up my worn leather purse from the chair where I'd set it when I arrived, moving slowly because my legs suddenly felt unsteady beneath me. "And having your elderly mother at your anniversary party with her discount store clothes and her stories about the old neighborhood would count against you in this evaluation." "Please don't be dramatic about this, Eleanor," said Clarissa with an exasperated sigh.
We're not banishing you from our lives. We'll have a nice family dinner afterward, just the three of us. Wouldn't that actually be better anyway? More intimate and personal? You'll have our full attention instead of having to compete with 50 other guests. I looked at my son, really looked at him, waiting for him to contradict his wife, waiting for him to say, of course his mother should be at his anniversary party, that family mattered more than impressing his boss, that he wasn't ashamed of where he came from or who had raised him. But Desmond just stood there in his expensive suit, silent, his jaw tight with discomfort, but not disagreement. He wouldn't meet my eyes. When exactly is this party? I asked quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. Saturday evening at 7, Clarissa answered promptly, checking her phone again. We're having it catered at the Willowbrook Country Club. Very elegant venue. We'll call you on Sunday morning, all right? We can meet for brunch at that little place you like, the one with the reasonable prices. Just the three of us, nice and relaxed. I nodded slowly, not trusting my voice enough to say anything else. As I walked toward their front door, my purse clutched tightly against my chest like a shield, Desmond followed me. I could hear his expensive leather shoes clicking on the marble floor. Mom, please try to understand. I turned to face him in the doorway, and for a moment I saw not the successful attorney in the $1,000 suit, but the little boy who used to cry in my arms after his father died, who used to tell me I was the strongest person in the whole world, who used to promise that when he grew up, he'd buy me a big house so I'd never have to work so hard again. I understand perfectly, Desmond. I understand that I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, to put you through law school at Pembroke University. I understand that I sold your father's entire vintage car collection, the cars he'd spent 20 years lovingly restoring, to pay for your bar exam prep courses and your first professional wardrobe. I understand that I gave up my own dreams of going back to school, of maybe having a life of my own, to make sure you had every opportunity that I never had. And I understand that now that you've made it, now that you're successful and sophisticated, I'm too common and too working class to be seen with. I'm an embarrassment, a liability.
That's not fair, Mom, he said, but his voice lacked any real conviction. He couldn't even argue with me convincingly. No, I agreed, my hand on the doorknob. It really isn't fair at all. I left their beautiful house in their exclusive Meadowbrook Hills neighborhood and drove home to my small one-bedroom apartment in the old Riverside district, the same apartment complex I'd moved into 25 years ago after selling our family house to help Desmond with his first-year expenses at Hartwick and Associates when money was impossibly tight and he was trying to establish himself. The drive took 40 minutes through increasingly less affluent neighborhoods. I watched the houses get smaller, the cars get older, the streets get more worn. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex parking lot, with its cracked asphalt and flickering streetlights, the contrast between my world and Desmond's world couldn't have been more stark. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed in the darkness, staring at the water-stained ceiling, replaying the conversation over and over in my mind like a broken record. But it wasn't just hurt that kept me awake, though the hurt was certainly there, sharp and constant. It was something else. Something that had been nagging at the edges of my consciousness for months, but that I'd tried desperately to ignore, to explain away, to pretend wasn't real. Victoria's behavior toward me had changed dramatically about 6 months ago, maybe longer. She'd never been particularly warm, it was true. From the moment Desmond had brought her home to meet me 8 years ago, there'd been a certain coolness, a certain distance in how she treated me. But I'd told myself it was just her personality, that some people were naturally more reserved. Lately, though, it had become something different, something almost hostile. The snide comments about my clothes being vintage when she really meant old and out of style. The way she wrinkled her nose when she visited my apartment, making it clear that everything about my modest home offended her sensibilities.
The increasingly elaborate excuses for why Desmond couldn't come visit me, why our weekly lunches had to be canceled, why family dinners had to be postponed indefinitely. And Desmond himself had changed too, I realized as I lay there in the darkness. My son, who used to call me every Sunday evening without fail, now went weeks without calling. He'd become more distant, more stressed, more secretive about his life. He traveled constantly for work, or so he claimed. Important depositions, crucial client meetings, essential conferences. He'd canceled our standing lunch dates 3 times in the past month alone, always with apologetic texts sent at the last minute. Something was wrong, something bigger than just social climbing and career ambitions and being embarrassed by his working-class mother. I sat up in bed and turned on the small lamp on my nightstand. The warm yellow light illuminated the framed photograph I kept there, a picture from Desmond and Clarissa's wedding 10 years ago. They looked so happy in that photo, so completely in love. Desmond in his tuxedo with his arm around his bride, both of them beaming at the camera with the kind of joy that seemed impossible to fake. Clarissa's dress had cost more than I made in 6 months, but I'd been happy for them. I'd thought my son had found someone who would make him happy, someone who would be a good partner in life. But as I studied the photograph more carefully in the lamplight, something caught my eye that I'd never noticed before in the 10 years I'd looked at this picture. In the background, slightly out of focus, was a young woman I didn't recognize. She was standing near the wedding party, but not part of it. And she was looking directly at Desmond with an expression on her face that seemed too intense, too familiar, too intimate for a casual wedding guest or distant acquaintance. Who was she? Why had I never noticed her before? And why was she looking at my son that way on his wedding day? I picked up my phone from the nightstand and opened Facebook, something I rarely used and barely understood. Desmond had insisted I create an account 4 or 5 years ago to stay connected with family, though I never quite figured out what I was supposed to do with it. Most days I just scrolled through photos of people I didn't know, feeling confused about why anyone would care about what strangers ate for lunch. But tonight, I navigated to Clarissa's profile page and scrolled through her recent posts. There were dozens of updates about the anniversary party over the past few weeks, photos of potential venue options with captions asking friends to vote for their favorite, detailed discussions about catering menus and wine selections, long lists of potential guests with comments and suggestions from her friends. And then I saw it. A comment from someone named Sienna Ravencroft that made my breath catch in my throat. Can't wait to celebrate with you both. It's been such a special year getting to know you better, Clarissa. This party is going to be absolutely magical. See you Saturday night. Heart, champagne glass. Clarissa's response, posted just 2 hours ago. You've been such a blessing to both of us, Sienna. I honestly couldn't imagine this celebration without you there. You've become such an important part of our lives. Thank you for everything. Heart kiss.
Something about the exchange felt wrong, too intimate, too effusive. I clicked on Sienna Ravencroft's profile with trembling fingers, not entirely sure what I was looking for, but knowing instinctively that I needed to see who this woman was. Her profile photo showed a strikingly beautiful woman, probably in her early 30s, with long, dark hair and the kind of sophisticated elegance that Clarissa so prized. Her cover photo showed her at what looked like a corporate event, standing in front of a banner that read, Hartwick and Associates Annual Partners Dinner. She worked at Desmond's law firm. My heart began to pound as I clicked through to her public photos, of which there were many. Sienna Ravencroft clearly had no concerns about privacy settings. Her entire life was documented in carefully curated photographs. There were professional photos from firm events showing her in elegant cocktail dresses, standing with groups of attorneys and staff members. There were casual photos from coffee shops and upscale restaurants around the city. There were vacation photos from beach resorts and European cities. And in dozens upon dozens of these photos, standing beside her with an expression I knew all too well because I'd seen it on his father's face years ago, was my son.
The way Desmond looked at her in these photos made my blood run cold. It was the way Jerome used to look at me when we were young and in love, before life got hard, before the accident. It was intimate and tender and completely inappropriate for a married man to look at anyone other than his wife. In one photo from what appeared to be a firm happy hour 3 months ago, Desmond's hand rested on the small of Sienna's back, his fingers splayed possessively. They were both laughing at something off camera, their bodies angled toward each other in a way that suggested they were in their own private world, oblivious to everyone else around them. In another photo from 6 weeks ago, they were sitting together at what looked like an outdoor cafe, their heads close together as they looked at something on Sienna's phone. The caption read, "Strategy session with my favorite colleague, coffee cup, cell phone emoji. Working with brilliant people makes even Monday mornings bearable." I kept scrolling, my hands shaking so badly now that I had to grip the phone with both hands to keep from dropping it. Each photo was another piece of evidence, another crack in the facade of Desmond's perfect marriage. There was a photo from 5 weeks ago tagged at the Riverside Inn, an expensive romantic restaurant 2 hours outside the city, known for its secluded tables and intimate atmosphere. Desmond and Sienna sat across from each other at a candlelit table, wine glasses raised in a toast. The caption read, "Sometimes the best conversations happen over good wine and better company. Here's to unexpected connections and new beginnings. Wine glass, sparkles emoji." I felt physically ill as I remembered that weekend. Desmond had called me that Saturday morning to cancel our lunch, claiming he had depositions all weekend in Millbrook and wouldn't be back until late Sunday. He'd sounded stressed and apologetic, and I'd told him not to worry, that I understood how demanding his work was. He hadn't been in depositions. He'd been having a romantic dinner with Sienna Ravencroft. I spent the rest of that night scrolling through social media, piecing together a timeline that made me sicker with each new discovery. I created a notes document on my phone and began recording everything I found: dates, locations, captions, comments, tags, a complete digital record of my son's infidelity. The business trip to Chicago in July that coincided exactly with Sienna's vacation photos from the same city, both of them posting pictures from the same restaurants and landmarks, though never together in the same frame. The firm conference in Atlanta in August, where Desmond had extended his stay for an extra 3 days, claiming he needed to meet with potential clients, while Sienna's photo showed her at the same hotel, her post filled with comments about making the most of unexpected free time, and sometimes the best moments are unplanned. There were inside jokes and comment threads that suggested a level of intimacy that went far beyond professional colleagues. There were deleted photos that I managed to capture in cached versions of pages, photos that had been taken down quickly, but not before I'd screenshot them. Photos of them at a jazz club, at an art gallery opening, at a sunrise breakfast spot known for being a romantic destination. The evidence was overwhelming and damning. My son was having an affair with Sienna Ravencroft, and somehow his wife Clarissa not only knew about it, but was actively including the other woman in their anniversary party. But that didn't make sense. Why would a wife invite her husband's mistress to their anniversary party? Unless Clarissa didn't know, unless Sienna had somehow ingratiated herself with Clarissa as well, becoming friends with her, earning her trust, all while carrying on an affair with Desmond behind her back? Or unless there was something else going on, something even more complicated that I didn't yet understand. By the time the sun rose on Wednesday morning, painting my small bedroom in shades of pink and gold, I had compiled everything I'd found into a folder on my phone. Photos, screenshots, comments, timestamps, locations, a complete digital record of my son's infidelity.
The evidence was damning and irrefutable, but I needed more. I needed to understand the full scope of what was happening. I needed to know if Clarissa was aware of the affair or if she was being deceived like everyone else. I needed to know what Sienna's intentions were and how long this had been going on. because if I was going to confront this situation, if I was going to protect Clarissa from the humiliation of celebrating an anniversary with her husband's mistress in attendance, if I was going to save my son from making a terrible mistake that would destroy everything he'd built, I needed to be absolutely certain of what I'd discovered. I needed the complete picture. And something in my gut told me that this 10th anniversary party was going to be more significant than anyone realized. Something told me that whatever Desmond and Sienna had planned, whatever was really going on beneath the surface of smiling social media posts and carefully maintained appearances, it was going to come to a head on Saturday night. I just needed to figure out how to stop it, and how to make sure that when the truth came out, when everything was finally revealed, it came out in a way that left no doubt about who the real villains were in this story. The party was in 4 days. I had 4 days to uncover the complete truth, to understand all the layers of deception and manipulation, to figure out how to deliver justice. And despite being told I wasn't welcome, despite being informed that I was too common and too embarrassing to attend my own son's anniversary celebration, I had every intention of being there when everything fell apart. Because I was Eleanor Hartwell, and I hadn't raised my son alone through poverty and grief and endless sacrifice just to watch him destroy his life and hurt innocent people without consequences. It was time to remind everyone, including my son, exactly who they were dealing with. Wednesday morning arrived with an unexpected clarity of purpose. I'd spent the entire night awake, fueled by the kind of righteous anger that burns away exhaustion and replaces it with pure determination. As I sat at my small kitchen table with a cup of bitter black coffee, I spread out everything I knew, like a detective organizing evidence and a murder investigation. My phone lay in front of me, filled with screenshots and saved photos. My notebook, the same spiral-bound kind I'd used the grocery lists and work schedules for 40 years, now contained a detailed timeline of Desmond and Sienna's affair. But what I had wasn't enough. Not yet. I had circumstantial evidence, suggestive photos, and a mother's intuition that something was deeply wrong. What I needed was proof so concrete that no one could deny it or explain it away. I needed to understand how deep this deception went, and more importantly, I needed to know if Clarissa was a victim or a willing participant in whatever scheme was unfolding. The first call I made that morning was to my oldest friend, Patricia Mendoza. We'd worked together at Riverside Textiles for 23 years before the factory closed down. Patricia had always been the practical one, the woman who could fix any problem with common sense and determination. She'd also become something of an amateur private investigator after her own husband's affair 15 years ago, developing skills in surveillance and information gathering that had proven useful to several women in our neighborhood over the years. "Eleanor?" Patricia's voice was thick with sleep when she answered. "It's 7 a.m. Are you okay?" "I need your help, Patty." I used the nickname I'd called her since we were both young women working the factory floor. "It's about Desmond." The sleep vanished from her voice immediately. "What's that boy done now?" "I swear, Eleanor, if he's been giving you trouble again—" I interrupted. "It's worse than trouble. I think he's having an affair. And I think his anniversary party on Saturday is somehow connected to it. I need help figuring out what's really going on." There was a long pause. Then Patricia said, "I'll be at your place in an hour. Put on another pot of coffee. We've got work to do." True to her word, Patricia arrived at my apartment at 8 o'clock sharp, carrying a large canvas bag that I knew from experience contained her investigation kit. She was 72, 3 years older than me, with steel gray hair she kept in a practical shortcut, and the kind of shrewd, observant eyes that missed nothing. We spent the next 2 hours going through everything I'd discovered. Patricia examined each screenshot, read every caption, studied the timestamps and locations with the intensity of a forensic accountant reviewing financial records. "This Sienna woman is smart," Patricia said finally, setting down my phone. "Look at how carefully she's constructed these posts. Nothing overtly romantic or sexual. Everything has plausible deniability. They're colleagues, they work together, they attend the same firm events. If anyone questioned it, she could claim complete innocence."
But the way they look at each other, I said, pointing to one of the photos, that's not how colleagues look at each other. No, it's not, Patricia agreed. But proving an affair based on photographs and social media posts is tricky. What we need is concrete evidence, phone records, text messages, eyewitness accounts of them together in compromising situations. And more importantly, we need to understand the end game here.
What do you mean? Patricia leaned back in my kitchen chair, her fingers steepled under her chin in the way she did when she was thinking hard. Affairs don't exist in a vacuum, Eleanor. There's always a reason, a motivation beyond just physical attraction. Some affairs are about escaping a bad marriage. Some are about ego and validation. Some are about money or status or opportunity. We need to figure out what this affair is really about, because that'll tell us what's going to happen at that anniversary party. You think something specific is planned for Saturday night? I'd bet money on it, Patricia said. Think about it. Clarissa is either unaware that her husband is having an affair with a woman who's been invited to their anniversary party, which seems unlikely given how observant wives usually are, or she is aware and has her own reasons for allowing it, which is even more interesting. Either way, that party is going to be a powder keg. And your son was foolish enough to ban you from attending, which means he doesn't want witnesses to whatever is about to unfold. A chill ran down my spine. What do you think is going to happen? I don't know yet, Patricia admitted, but we're going to find out. First things first, we need to dig deeper into Sienna Ravencroft. Who is she really? What's her background? What does she do at the law firm? And most importantly, what does she stand to gain from all this? We started with the basics. Patricia pulled out her laptop, a device she'd mastered despite her age, and began running searches on Sienna Ravencroft. What we found painted an interesting picture. Sienna had joined Hartwick & Associates 3 years ago as a senior paralegal, transferring from a smaller firm in Millbrook. She specialized in corporate law and mergers and acquisitions, the same area where Desmond worked. Her LinkedIn profile showed an impressive educational background, with a degree from Whitmore University and several professional certifications. She'd worked her way up quickly at Hartwick & Associates, earning bonuses and recognition for her work on major deals. She's ambitious, Patricia noted. Look at her career trajectory. She's not content being a paralegal forever. See these continuing education courses? She's taking law school prerequisite classes online. She wants to be an attorney herself. How does that connect to Desmond? Maybe it doesn't, or maybe it does. What if she saw your son as a stepping stone, a way to advance her career faster by getting close to a rising star attorney? Or what if there's something else going on entirely? We dug deeper, searching for any information about Sienna's personal life. What we found was surprisingly sparse. Unlike her prolific posting about work events and social gatherings, there was almost nothing about her private life before she'd moved to our city 3 years ago. No family photos, no mentions of a hometown, no old friends tagged in nostalgic posts. That's odd, I said. Most people have at least some history on social media. Baby photos, high school friends, something. Patricia nodded slowly. Her eyes narrowed. It's like she appeared fully formed 3 years ago with no past. People who scrub their social media that thoroughly are usually hiding something. She pulled out her phone and made a call. Marcus, it's Patricia Mendoza. Yes, it's been too long. Listen, I need a favor. Can you run a background check for me? Just basic information, nothing illegal. She gave him Sienna's full name and date of birth that we'd found on her LinkedIn profile. Call me back as soon as you have something. Thanks, honey. She hung up and saw my questioning look. Marcus is my nephew. He works in HR for a large corporation. He has access to background check services. Nothing invasive, just the public records that any employer would see. While we waited for Marcus to call back, we turned our attention to Clarissa. Patricia pulled up her social media profiles, and we began examining them with the same careful attention we'd given to Sienna's.
Clarissa's online presence was exactly what I expected. Perfectly curated photos of her perfect life, designer clothes, expensive restaurants, charity galas, country club events. Everything was calculated to present an image of success and sophistication. But as we scrolled through months of posts, something began to emerge, a pattern that made my stomach turn. "Look at the timing," Patricia said, pointing to a series of posts from about 8 months ago. Right around here, Clarissa's posts change. See how she starts mentioning my dear friend Sienna and girls' night with my favorite people? And look who starts appearing in her photos. There was Sienna standing with Clarissa and a group of other women at a wine tasting event. Sienna and Clarissa having lunch at an expensive bistro. Sienna attending a charity auction with Clarissa and Desmond. She infiltrated the marriage, I breathed. She didn't just seduce Desmond, she befriended Clarissa first. Or, at the same time, Patricia corrected. Look at this caption from 7 months ago. "So grateful to have found such a genuine friend at work. Sienna makes every day at the office brighter." That's Clarissa posting about Sienna. And look at Desmond's comment underneath. "You two are going to take over the world together." We kept scrolling, watching the relationship between all three of them develop over social media. Clarissa and Sienna became increasingly close, with posts about shopping trips, spa days, and long conversations over coffee. Desmond appeared in many of the photos, always smiling, always comfortable, as if having his wife and his mistress become best friends was the most natural thing in the world.
"This is sick," I whispered. "How could he do this? How could he betray Clarissa like this while watching her become friends with the woman he's sleeping with?" "Some men are sociopaths," Patricia said flatly. "They can compartmentalize, lie without guilt, manipulate everyone around them. I hate to say it, Eleanor, but your son might be one of them." The words hit me like a physical blow. I wanted to defend Desmond, to say that he was a good man who'd made a mistake, that this wasn't who he really was. But the evidence was overwhelming. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a one-time mistake. This was calculated, systematic deception carried out over months, possibly longer. Patricia's phone rang, making us both jump. She answered it quickly. "Marcus, what did you find?" I watched her face as she listened, saw her expression grow more grave with each passing second. She pulled out her notebook and began writing rapidly. "Are you sure about that?" "Yes, I understand. Can you email me the report?" "Thanks, honey. I owe you dinner." She hung up and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Eleanor, you need to prepare yourself for this. Just tell me. Sienna Ravencroft isn't her real name. She was born Sienna Catherine Thornfield 32 years ago in Millbrook. The name hit me like a freight train. Thornfield? Like Desmond's boss, Mr. Thornfield?" Patricia nodded grimly. "She's his daughter, Jonathan Thornfield's only child. She changed her last name legally 3.5 years ago, right before she moved here and started working at Hartwick & Associates." My mind reeled, trying to process this information and understand what it meant. But why would she hide that? Why wouldn't she use her father's name and connections? "That's the question, isn't it?" Patricia said. "Marcus found something else, too. Sienna was engaged 4 years ago to a man named David Brennan. He was an attorney at her father's original firm in Millbrook. The engagement was broken off suddenly, and David Brennan left the legal profession entirely 6 months later. No one knows exactly what happened, but there were rumors of some kind of scandal. You think Sienna was involved? I think Sienna has a pattern of getting involved with attorneys and destroying their lives. And now she set her sights on your son. The question is why? What does she want from Desmond? And what role does her father play in all of this? We spent the rest of the morning trying to piece together the puzzle, but we were missing too many pieces. We needed more information, and we needed it fast. The party was only 3 days away. "We need to talk to someone who knows what's really going on," Patricia said finally. "Someone inside the situation who might be willing to tell us the truth." "Who?" I asked. "Everyone involved is lying or being deceived." Patricia thought for a moment, then snapped her fingers. What about Desmond's assistant, the one at his office? They always know more than anyone thinks they do. I searched my memory. Bethany. Her name is Bethany Rodriguez. She's worked for Desmond for about 5 years. Do you know how to reach her? I have her number. Desmond gave it to me years ago in case I ever needed to contact him urgently at the office. Patricia grinned. Perfect. Call her. Tell her you need to discuss something important about Desmond, something that's better discussed in person, away from the office. My hands were shaking as I dialed Bethany's number. She answered on the third ring, her voice professional and efficient. Bethany Rodriguez? This is Eleanor Hartwell, Desmond's mother. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. There was a brief pause. Then her voice softened. Mrs. Hartwell, of course. Is everything all right? Is Desmond okay? That's what I need to talk to you about, I said carefully. I've discovered some things that concern me deeply about my son's situation. I know this is unusual, but would you be willing to meet with me for coffee? Today, if possible? It's extremely important. Another pause, longer this time. When Bethany spoke again, her voice was different. Careful. What kind of things have you discovered, Mrs. Hartwell? Things about Desmond and Sienna Ravencroft. Things about the anniversary party this Saturday. Things that I think you probably know about but haven't been able to tell anyone. I heard her sharp intake of breath. Where do you want to meet? We agreed to meet at a small coffee shop called the Riverside Cafe, far from Hartwick and Associates and far from anywhere Desmond or his colleagues might see us. Patricia insisted on coming with me, and I was grateful for her presence as we drove across town that afternoon. Bethany was already there when we arrived, sitting at a corner table far from the windows. She was a petite woman in her late 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun and intelligent eyes that darted nervously around the cafe. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept well in weeks. Mrs. Hartwell, she said as we approached, half rising from her chair, thank you for meeting me. Thank you for coming, I said, sitting across from her. This is my friend Patricia. She's helping me understand what's happening with my son. Bethany nodded at Patricia, then looked back at me. Her hands were wrapped tightly around her coffee cup, knuckles white with tension. How much do you know? I know Desmond is having an affair with Sienna Ravencroft. I know Sienna is actually Sienna Catherine Thornfield, the daughter of Desmond's boss. I know something is planned for the anniversary party on Saturday. What I don't know is the full scope of what's happening or what the endgame is.
Bethany closed her eyes briefly as if deciding whether to trust us. When she opened them, there were tears shimmering at the edges. I've been wanting to tell someone for months. It's been eating me alive. Tell us everything, Patricia said gently. We're here to help, not to judge. Bethany took a deep breath and began to speak. What she told us over the next hour made me realize that the situation was so much worse than I had imagined. The affair started about a year ago, Bethany said, not 6 months ago like the social media posts might suggest. Sienna was assigned to work with Desmond on a major merger deal. They started working late nights together, long hours in the conference room. I didn't think anything of it at first. That's normal in our business. When did you realize something was wrong? I asked. About 9 months ago, I came back to the office late one night because I'd forgotten my phone. I saw them in Desmond's office. She trailed off, looking uncomfortable. We understand, Patricia said. Bethany nodded gratefully. After that, I started noticing things. Secret phone calls, text messages he'd delete immediately, business trips that didn't match up with the actual case calendars. And Sienna was always there, always finding reasons to be near Desmond, always touching his arm or laughing at his jokes. Did Clarissa know? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. That's the strange part, Bethany said. About 8 months ago, Sienna started deliberately befriending Clarissa. She'd ask Desmond about Clarissa's interests, what she liked to do, where she liked to shop. Then she'd engineer accidental meetings. They'd run into each other at the gym or at charity events. Sienna would compliment Clarissa, ask for advice about fashion or society things. She manipulated Clarissa into thinking they were becoming genuine friends.
Why? Patricia asked. Why would a mistress want to befriend the wife? That's what I couldn't figure out at first, Bethany said. It seemed insane. But then I overheard a conversation between Sienna and her father about 2 months ago. We both leaned forward. What did you hear? Mr. Thornfield came to the office late one evening. He didn't know I was still there, working in the file room nearby. I heard him talking to Sienna in her office. He said something like, "Is everything proceeding according to plan? Have you secured his complete trust?" And Sienna said, "Yes, he's completely devoted to me. He'll do whatever I ask. And Clarissa trusts me implicitly. By the time the anniversary party happens, everything will be in place." My blood ran cold. In place for what? I don't know exactly, Bethany admitted, but I heard Mr. Thornfield say something about the partnership and making sure he's completely compromised. Mrs. Hartwell, I think this whole affair is some kind of setup. I think Sienna seduced your son deliberately as part of some plan her father orchestrated. We exchanged horrified looks. But why? I asked. What would they gain from destroying Desmond's marriage and career? That's what I've been trying to figure out, Bethany said. But there's more. About 3 weeks ago, I was filing documents in Desmond's office, and I found a folder that had been accidentally mixed in with some contracts. It contained photographs. What kind of photographs? Bethany's face flushed. Compromising ones, of Desmond and Sienna together in hotel rooms. Very explicit ones. Someone had been documenting their affair, taking pictures without them knowing. And there were also financial documents in the folder. Bank statements showing large transfers of money from firm accounts to personal accounts. Expense reports that had been altered. Evidence of embezzlement. I felt like I might be sick. Was Desmond stealing from the firm? I don't think so, Bethany said quickly. The documents looked fake to me. The formatting was slightly off. The signatures didn't quite match his actual signature, but they were good fakes. Good enough that if someone presented them as evidence, they'd be very damaging. Combined with the photos of the affair, they destroyed Desmond completely. Blackmail, Patricia said grimly. Sienna and her father are setting up your son for blackmail. The affair gives them leverage. The fake financial documents give them even more. They can threaten to expose him, ruin his career, possibly even have him prosecuted for crimes he didn't commit. But why? I repeated. Why would Jonathan Thornfield want to destroy one of his own attorneys? Bethany shook her head. I don't know. But I think the answer has something to do with that anniversary party. I think whatever they're planning, it's going to happen on Saturday night. And I think it's going to be bad. We talked for another 30 minutes, with Bethany sharing every detail she could remember about Desmond's behavior over the past year, about Sienna's manipulation tactics, about the strange interactions between Sienna and her father. By the time we left the cafe, I had filled another 10 pages in my notebook. As Patricia drove us back to my apartment, I stared out the window at the passing streets, trying to make sense of everything we'd learned. We need to figure out Jonathan Thornfield's motivation, Patricia said, breaking the silence. That's the key to all of this. Why would a senior partner at a prestigious law firm orchestrate such an elaborate scheme to compromise one of his own attorneys? What does he have to gain? I don't know, I admitted, but we have 2 days to find out before that party, and we need to figure out how to stop whatever they have planned. Patricia pulled into the parking lot of my apartment complex and turned to face me. Eleanor, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Are you prepared for the possibility that Desmond might be more involved in this than we think? That he might not be an innocent victim being manipulated?
I wanted to protest, to defend my son, to insist that he was being deceived and controlled. But I thought about how he'd looked at Sienna in those photos. I thought about how he'd treated me, his own mother, with such contempt and embarrassment. I thought about the cold calculation it took to ban me from his anniversary party, to prioritize his career and his boss's approval over his own family. I don't know what to believe anymore, I said quietly.
The son I raised would never do these things. But the man I saw in that house on Tuesday, the man who looked me in the eye and told me I was too embarrassing to attend his party, I don't know who that person is. Patricia reached over and squeezed my hand. We're going to get to the bottom of this, and we're going to make sure that whoever is guilty faces consequences. But Eleanor, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that the person you need to save might not be your son. It might be Clarissa. That evening, back in my apartment, I couldn't stop thinking about Bethany's revelations. The compromising photographs, the fake financial documents, the overheard conversation between Sienna and her father. It all pointed to a conspiracy, a deliberate plot to destroy Desmond. But the question that kept haunting me was Patricia's question. Was Desmond truly a victim, or was he complicit in his own downfall? I pulled out the wedding photo again, studying Desmond's face on what should have been the happiest day of his life. Had he loved Clarissa then? Or had his marriage always been a calculated move, another step up the social ladder, another piece of the image he wanted to present to the world? My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number. Mrs. Hartwell, this is Bethany. I'm using a different phone because I don't want this traced back to me. I remembered something else after you left. Last week, I saw a catering invoice for the anniversary party. It was for 51 guests, not 50, like Clarissa mentioned. When I asked about the discrepancy, the event coordinator said there was one special guest who was being added at the last minute, someone very important who had requested to attend. The name on that additional invocation was Dr. Margaret Brennan. I looked her up. She's David Brennan's mother. David was Sienna's ex-fiancé who left the legal profession after their engagement ended. I don't know what it means, but I thought you should know. I stared at the message, my mind racing. Why would Sienna's ex-fiancé's mother be attending Desmond's anniversary party? What connection could she possibly have to any of this? Unless she wasn't there as a guest. Unless she was there to witness something or to testify about something. I forwarded the message to Patricia, then pulled out my laptop. It was time to dig into the story of Sienna Thornfield and David Brennan. Whatever had happened between them 4 years ago was clearly relevant to what was happening now. And I had a growing suspicion that Dr. Margaret Brennan was going to be the key to unraveling this entire conspiracy. The party was in 2 days. 2 days to piece together the truth. 2 days to figure out how to stop a plan that had been months, maybe years in the making. 2 days to save my son from a trap he might not even realize he'd walked into. Or 2 days to discover that my son wasn't the victim I hoped he was, but rather a willing participant in something dark and destructive. Either way, I was going to be at that anniversary party on Saturday night, and I was going to make sure that the truth, whatever it was, finally came to light. Thursday morning arrived with a sense of urgency that made my hands shake as I poured my coffee. Patricia had called at 6 in the morning with news that changed everything. I found David Brennan, she had said without preamble. And Eleanor, you need to hear what he has to say. I'm picking you up in an hour. Now, we were driving across the city to a modest apartment complex in the Westfield neighborhood, where David Brennan had agreed to meet with us. According to Patricia's research, David had once been a rising star at Thornfield and Partners, Jonathan Thornfield's original firm in Millbrook. He'd been engaged to Sienna, set to marry the boss's daughter, positioned for a partnership track that would have set him up for life. Then, everything had fallen apart, and David had walked away from the legal profession entirely. He now worked as a high school teacher, living a quiet life far removed from the cutthroat world of corporate law. Why did he agree to meet with us? I asked as Patricia pulled into the parking lot. Because I told him what was happening to your son, Patricia said grimly. And he said it sounded exactly like what happened to him. He said he's been waiting 4 years for someone to finally expose what the Thornfields really are. David Brennan answered his door wearing jeans and a faded college sweatshirt, looking nothing like the polished attorney he had once been. He was in his late 30s, with kind eyes that held a deep sadness and premature gray streaking through his dark hair. "Mrs. Hartwell," he said, shaking my hand. "I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. Please, come in." His apartment was small but comfortable, filled with bookshelves and plants. We sat in his living room, and he brought us tea with the careful attention of someone who had learned to find peace in small rituals. "Patricia told me your son is involved with Sienna Thornfield, and that there's an anniversary party planned for this weekend where something is supposed to happen. Is that correct?"
Yes, I said. We think Jonathan Thornfield and his daughter are setting up my son for some kind of blackmail or public humiliation. We found evidence of compromising photographs and fake financial documents. But we don't understand why. What do they have to gain? David set down his teacup with a hand that trembled slightly. They're not setting him up for blackmail, Mrs. Hartwell. They're setting him up for destruction, complete and total professional annihilation. And they're going to do it publicly in front of everyone who matters in your son's career, so that when they're done, he'll have nothing left. The room felt suddenly cold. But why? Why would Jonathan Thornfield want to destroy one of his own attorneys? "Because that's what he does," David said, his voice bitter. "Jonathan Thornfield is a sadist who gets pleasure from ruining people's lives, and his daughter is exactly like him. Together, they find promising young attorneys, build them up, make them dependent on the firm and the Thornfield name, and then they destroy them for sport. I was their victim 4 years ago. Your son is their victim now." Patricia leaned forward. "Tell us exactly what happened to you." David took a deep breath and began his story. What he told us over the next hour made me understand the true horror of what my son was facing. "I met Sienna 6 years ago when I joined Thornfield and Partners fresh out of law school. She was working as a paralegal at her father's firm, supposedly learning the business from the ground up before going to law school herself. She was beautiful, charming, intelligent. When she showed interest in me, I felt like the luckiest man alive." "The boss's daughter fell for you," Patricia said. "That's what I thought," David said. "What I didn't realize was that I had been selected, chosen as their next target. See, Jonathan Thornfield has a very specific pattern. Every few years, he picks a promising young attorney at his firm, someone talented, ambitious, with their whole career ahead of them, someone who could potentially become a threat to his power or his daughter's future prospects. And he destroys them." "How?" I asked, though I was terrified of the answer. "He uses Sienna as bait," he said. "She seduces the target, makes them fall in love with her, gets them to trust her completely. Meanwhile, Jonathan positions the target for a major case, something high-profile and important. He builds them up, praises their work, makes them feel indispensable. And then, when the target is completely dependent on both the father and the daughter, when they've committed themselves fully to the relationship and the career path, the Thornfields spring their trap." "What kind of trap?" David's face was pale as he continued. "In my case, I was working on a major corporate merger, the biggest case of my career. Sienna had access to all my work files because we were engaged and living together. What I didn't know was that she was subtly sabotaging my work, changing dates on documents, altering contract terms, introducing errors that would cause the deal to fall apart. And she was documenting everything, making it look like I was the one making the mistakes." "Dear God," I whispered. "The merger collapsed 3 days before our wedding. The client lost millions of dollars. Jonathan Thornfield called me into his office and presented me with evidence of all my supposed errors and incompetence. He had documentation that appeared to show I'd been negligent, possibly even deliberately sabotaging the deal. He told me I had 2 choices. I could resign from the firm immediately and leave the legal profession, or he would report me to the Bar Association and make sure I was disbarred and possibly prosecuted for malpractice. In Siena? Patricia asked. She broke off our engagement that same day, David said, his voice hollow. Told me she couldn't marry someone who'd proven to be such a failure and disappointment. She actually cried as she said it, played the role of the heartbroken fiancé perfectly. Within a month, she'd moved to your city and started working at Hartwick & Associates under her mother's maiden name. I later found out she'd legally changed her name to distance herself from what happened so future targets wouldn't discover the pattern. I felt sick. But why? Why would they go to such elaborate lengths to destroy you? That's what I couldn't understand at first. I agonized over it for years. What had I done to deserve this? Then about a year ago, I ran into a former colleague from Thornfield and Partners. He'd had too much to drink, and he told me something that made everything clear. Jonathan Thornfield had been planning to bring in a new senior partner, someone from outside the firm. But several of the junior attorneys, including me, had objected. We thought positions should be filled from within, that we'd earned the chance to advance. We'd even drafted a letter to the other partners expressing our concerns. He destroyed you for questioning his authority, Patricia said. Exactly. And he sent a message to everyone else at the firm. This is what happens when you challenge Jonathan Thornfield. After what happened to me, no one at that firm ever questioned his decisions again. He ruled through fear and intimidation, and I was his example. I thought about Desmond, about his ambition and his confidence. My son was being considered for junior partner. He mentioned it when he told me I couldn't come to the anniversary party. David nodded grimly. That's probably the trigger. Your son was advancing too quickly, getting too much recognition, maybe even showing signs of independent thinking. Jonathan Thornfield saw him as a potential threat, so he sicked on Siena. And now they're going to destroy him publicly at his anniversary party in front of all his colleagues and clients, just like they destroyed me right before my wedding.
But Desmond's already married, I said. How does that fit into their pattern?
That's actually worse, David said. With me, they just had to break an engagement. With your son, they're going to humiliate him in front of his wife, destroy his marriage in addition to his career. Think about it, Mrs. Hartwell. An anniversary party attended by everyone important in his professional life, his colleagues, his clients, his boss. What better venue to expose his affair with the boss's daughter, to present evidence of financial crimes, to completely annihilate his reputation in one fell swoop? Patricia's eyes widened. That's why Siena befriended Clarissa. She wanted Clarissa to trust her, to be completely blindsided by the revelation. The betrayal will be even more devastating because Clarissa thought Siena was her friend. And Clarissa's humiliation will add to Desmond's, David added. Everyone at that party will witness not just a cheating husband being exposed, but a wife being publicly betrayed by both her husband and her supposed best friend. It'll be the scandal of the year in your city's legal community. No firm will touch Desmond after that. He'll be radioactive. I felt tears streaming down my face. Whatever mistakes my son had made, whatever poor choices he'd made in his life, he didn't deserve this calculated destruction. No one did. There's something else you should know, David said quietly. My mother, Dr. Margaret Brennan, she's been documenting the Thornfields' pattern for the past 4 years. After what happened to me, she started investigating. She found 3 other attorneys who'd been destroyed by Jonathan and Siena Thornfield over the years. Different firms, different cities, but always the same pattern. Seduce, manipulate, sabotage, destroy. Your mother is the 51st guest, I breathed. She's been invited to the anniversary party. I called her last night after Patricia contacted me, David said. She told me she'd received an invitation to the party, supposedly because she was serving as a character witness for some award Desmond was receiving. But she suspects it's actually because the Thornfields found out about her investigation. They're inviting her to witness their triumph, to show her that they can keep getting away with destroying people and no one can stop them. Patricia stood up abruptly, pacing the small living room. We have to stop them. We have evidence now. David's testimony, the pattern of previous victims, documentation of their methods. We can expose them before they destroyed Desmond. It's not that simple, David said. The Thornfields are extremely careful. Everything they do has plausible deniability.
Sienna seduced your son, yes, but he chose to have an affair. If there are fake financial documents, they can claim they were just pointing out errors they discovered in his work. They never leave evidence that directly ties back to them. That's why my mother has been documenting everything so carefully, trying to build an airtight case. Then we need to talk to your mother, I said, wiping my tears. We need to coordinate with her. If she's going to be at that party, and we're going to be at that party, we need to make sure we're ready for whatever the Thornfields have planned. David pulled out his phone. I'll call her right now. Dr. Margaret Brennan agreed to meet with us that afternoon at her hotel in the city. She was a striking woman in her silver hair, pulled back in an elegant bun, and the sharp, intelligent eyes of someone who missed nothing. She'd been a clinical psychologist for 30 years before retiring, and she brought that analytical mind to her investigation of the people who'd destroyed her son's life. Mrs. Hartwell, she said as we gathered in her hotel suite, I'm glad David connected us. I've been investigating the Thornfields for 4 years, and I believe your son is their next target. But I also believe that this anniversary party represents an opportunity we haven't had before. What kind of opportunity? Patricia asked. Dr. Brennan spread out a thick folder on the coffee table. It contained years of documentation, testimony from victims, financial records, pattern analyses, psychological profiles. The Thornfields have gotten away with this so long because they're careful and because their victims are too destroyed to fight back. But this time, we have advanced warning. We know what they're planning before they execute it, and we have witnesses who are willing to expose them. What exactly do you think they're planning for Saturday night? I asked. Based on their pattern and the setup I've observed, I believe they're going to publicly expose Desmond's affair with Sienna during the anniversary party, probably during the toast or speeches when everyone is paying attention. They'll present it as a shocking revelation, with Clarissa playing the devastated wife and Sienna playing the remorseful other woman. Then, Jonathan Thornfield will announce that he has evidence of financial impropriety, presenting the fake documents they've created. He'll demand Desmond's immediate resignation from the firm, and he'll encourage the clients present to terminate their relationship with him. By the end of the evening, Desmond's career, marriage, and reputation will be destroyed. The calculated cruelty of it took my breath away. And you think we can stop this? I asked. I think we can turn the tables, Dr. Brennan said. They're expecting a room full of shocked witnesses to Desmond's downfall. Instead, we're going to give them a room full of witnesses to their own exposure. We're going to reveal their pattern of destruction. We're going to present evidence of their manipulation and conspiracy, and we're going to make sure that everyone in that room understands exactly who the real villains are. How?
Dr. Brennan smiled, and there was steel in that smile. We're going to let them start their trap. Let them expose the affair. Let Jonathan Thornfield begin his accusations. And then we're going to interrupt with the truth. David will be there to testify about what they did to him. I'll present my documentation of their pattern across multiple victims. And you, Mrs. Hartwell, will speak as a mother who discovered the conspiracy and fought to save her son. But Desmond had an actual affair with Sienna, I said. He made that choice. How do we defend that? We don't defend it, Dr. Brennan said. We contextualize it. We show how Sienna deliberately targeted him, seduced him, manipulated him as part of a calculated plan. We show how her father enabled and orchestrated the entire scheme. Desmond made a terrible mistake by having an affair, yes, but he was also the victim of a predatory conspiracy. The Thornfields selected him for destruction and executed their plan methodically. That doesn't excuse his choices, but it does expose the larger crime. Patricia nodded slowly. And by exposing them publicly, in front of all these witnesses, we protect Desmond and ensure the Thornfields can't just bury this like they've buried their previous victims. Exactly, Dr. Brennan said. Public exposure is the only weapon that works against people like this. Once everyone knows their pattern, once their methods are revealed, they lose their power. We spent the next several hours planning every detail of Saturday night. Dr. Brennan had been officially invited as a guest, so her presence wouldn't raise suspicions. David would arrive separately, pretending to be a server or staff member until the right moment.
Patricia would come as my guest since I was determined to attend despite being banned. "They'll try to have you removed when you arrive," Dr. Brennan warned. "Clarissa or Desmond will see you and demand you leave." "Let them try," I said. "I'm not going anywhere. This is my son's life we're fighting for." We also discussed how to handle Clarissa. Throughout all of this, she remained an innocent victim who had no idea her husband was having an affair or that her supposed best friend was deliberately destroying her marriage. "Clarissa is going to be devastated no matter what happens on Saturday night," I said. "Even if we expose the Thornfields' conspiracy, she still has to face the fact that her husband betrayed her." "Yes," Dr. Brennan agreed, "but at least she'll understand the full context of that betrayal. She'll know she was targeted and manipulated not just by Desmond's weakness, but by a calculated conspiracy. That knowledge won't take away the pain, but it might help her process it and eventually heal." By the time we finished planning, it was early evening. I felt exhausted, but also energized by a sense of purpose. We had a plan, we had evidence, we had witnesses, and most importantly, we had the truth on our side. Friday passed in a blur of final preparations. Patricia and I reviewed our documentation repeatedly, making sure we had copies of everything, making sure we could present our evidence clearly and convincingly. Dr. Brennan sent us additional materials from her investigation. David called to confirm he'd arranged everything on his end. I barely slept Friday night. I kept thinking about what was coming, about the confrontation that would unfold tomorrow evening. I thought about Desmond, about the little boy he'd been and the man he'd become. I thought about all my mistakes as a mother, wondering if I had somehow failed him, if I had raised him to value success and status over integrity and kindness. But I also thought about the Thornfields, about their calculated cruelty, about all the lives they had destroyed for sport and ego. And I thought about Clarissa, who was about to have her heart broken in the most public and humiliating way possible. Tomorrow night, one way or another, the truth was coming out. Saturday evening arrived with the weight of destiny. Patricia picked me up at 5 o'clock, giving us plenty of time to drive to the Willowbrook Country Club where the party was being held. "Are you ready for this?" she asked as we pulled out of my apartment complex. "I have to be," I said. "This is for Desmond, for Clarissa, for David, and all the other people the Thornfields have destroyed." The Willowbrook Country Club was exactly the kind of ostentatiously elegant venue I'd expected. Manicured grounds, a grand entrance with marble columns, valet parking, and staff in formal attire. Patricia handed over her keys to a young valet, and we walked toward the entrance together. "Remember," Patricia said quietly, "stay calm no matter what happens. We need to appear reasonable and credible when the moment comes." The main ballroom had been transformed into an elegant celebration space. Round tables covered in white linen surrounded a central dance floor. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over everything. And everywhere I looked, there were beautifully dressed people holding champagne glasses and engaging in animated conversation. I saw Desmond immediately. He stood near the bar with Clarissa beside him, both of them looking like the perfect successful couple. Clarissa wore a stunning burgundy gown that probably cost thousands of dollars. Desmond wore an impeccably tailored tuxedo. They were smiling and laughing with guests, playing their roles perfectly. And there, standing with them in an emerald green dress that hugged her figure, was Sienna Thornfield. She had her hand on Clarissa's arm in a gesture of friendship, and when she laughed at something Desmond said, I saw the predatory gleam in her eyes. We'd barely made it 10 steps into the ballroom when Clarissa spotted us. Her face went from surprise to confusion to fury in the span of 3 seconds.
"What are you doing here?" she hissed, striding toward us with Desmond following close behind. "You weren't invited, Eleanor. You need to leave immediately." "I'm not leaving," I said calmly. "I'm here as a guest of Dr. Margaret Brennan. Perhaps you remember her. She's on your guest list." Clarissa's eyes narrowed. "I don't care whose guest you claim to be. This is my party and you're not welcome. Desmond, call security." But before Desmond could move, a clear, authoritative voice cut through the tension. "That won't be necessary."
We all turned to see Dr. Brennan approaching, looking elegant in a navy blue evening gown. Behind her, dressed as a waiter in a black vest and bow tie, was David Brennan. "I invited Mrs. Hartwell as my guest," Dr. Brennan said smoothly. "I hope that's not a problem, given that I was invited to this celebration specifically to witness something important." Jonathan Thornfield materialized from the crowd, and I finally came face to face with the man who'd orchestrated so much destruction. He was in his early 60s, distinguished-looking, with silver hair and the kind of commanding presence that came from years of power and privilege. "Dr. Brennan," he said, his voice smooth as silk, "how wonderful that you could join us, and I see you've brought guests. How unexpected." "Yes," Dr. Brennan said. "I thought given the significance of this evening's planned events, it would be appropriate to have additional witnesses present." Something flickered in Thornfield's eyes, a moment of uncertainty. But he recovered quickly, his smile never wavering. "I'm not sure what you mean, but you're all welcome here. After all, the more people to celebrate Desmond and Clarissa's marriage, the better." The next hour passed in excruciating tension. Patricia and I stayed close to Dr. Brennan, watching as the party unfolded. Guests arrived, mingled, consumed champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Clarissa kept shooting furious glances in my direction, but with Dr. Brennan claiming us as her guests, she couldn't force us to leave without causing a scene. I watched Sienna work the room like a predator, circling prey. She stayed close to both Desmond and Clarissa, touching them frequently, laughing at their jokes, playing the role of devoted friend and colleague. Several times I saw her exchange meaningful glances with her father across the room. At exactly 8 o'clock, as we'd expected, the speeches began. Clarissa's father stood up first, delivering a toast to the happy couple that praised Desmond's success and his daughter's happiness. Other guests followed with their own toasts and well wishes. And then Jonathan Thornfield stood up, tapping his champagne glass with a knife to get everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to take a moment to speak about Desmond Morrison, who works at my firm and whom I've had the pleasure of mentoring these past several years." Desmond looked pleased and proud, clearly expecting praise and recognition. Clarissa beamed beside him, her hand on his arm. "Desmond is an exceptionally talented attorney, ambitious, driven, intelligent, the kind of person who seems destined for great success, which is why it pains me so much to share what I've recently discovered about his character and conduct." The room went utterly silent. Desmond's smile faltered. Clarissa looked confused. "I've learned that Desmond has been having an inappropriate relationship with a member of my staff, an affair that has been going on for quite some time, and I believe the woman in question should be the one to address the situation directly." All eyes turned to Sienna. She stood slowly, and I saw tears beginning to stream down her face. She was a magnificent actress, I had to admit. "I'm so sorry, Clarissa," she said, her voice breaking. "I never meant for this to happen. Desmond and we tried to fight our feelings, but we fell in love. I know it's wrong. I know I've betrayed your trust, but I can't keep lying anymore. I can't keep pretending." Clarissa's face went white. She looked at Desmond, searching for a denial, searching for anything that would make this not true. But Desmond just stood there, frozen, unable to speak. "Furthermore," Thornfield continued, "I've discovered evidence of financial impropriety in Desmond's handling of client accounts, expense reports that don't match actual expenditures, transfers of funds that lack proper authorization. I have documentation here. That's quite enough." Dr. Brennan's voice cut through the room like a blade. She stood up, commanding attention, and suddenly the spotlight shifted. "Ladies and gentlemen, you're witnessing a carefully orchestrated fraud. What Jonathan and Sienna Thornfield are presenting to you tonight is not a shocking revelation, but rather the culmination of a conspiracy that has destroyed multiple lives over the years, and I can prove it." Thornfield's face darkened. "Dr. Brennan, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is highly inappropriate."
What's inappropriate is your pattern of destroying promising young attorneys for sport. David, would you please join me?" David stepped forward, removing the waiter's vest to reveal his true identity. Several people in the crowd gasped in recognition. "My name is David Brennan," he said, his voice steady and strong. "4 years ago, Jonathan and Sienna Thornfield did exactly what they're doing to Desmond Morrison tonight. They seduced me, manipulated me, sabotaged my work, and destroyed my career. And they did it deliberately, as part of a pattern that has victimized at least 4 attorneys over the past decade."
He began presenting evidence, documentation of his case, testimony from other victims, analysis of the Thornfields' methods. As he spoke, I saw the faces of the guests transform from confusion to shock to understanding. Patricia stood up next, adding the evidence we'd compiled about Sienna's manipulation of Desmond, the fake financial documents, the calculated way she'd befriended Clarissa as part of the conspiracy. And then it was my turn. I stood up on shaking legs and looked at my son across the room. "Desmond made a terrible mistake," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent ballroom. "He had an affair, and that was wrong. But he was also targeted by predators who selected him for destruction. They manipulated him, seduced him, sabotaged him, all as part of a calculated plan to ruin his life publicly. My son is not innocent, but he is a victim." I turned to face the Thornfields. And these 2 people have gotten away with destroying lives for years because their victims were too broken to fight back. But tonight, that ends. Tonight, everyone in this room knows exactly who and what you are. The room erupted. Guests were pulling out their phones, documenting everything. Several attorneys present were already making calls, presumably to bar associations and ethics committees. Jonathan Thornfield's face had turned purple with rage, but he was powerless to stop what was happening. Sienna tried to leave, but several guests blocked her path. They wanted answers. They wanted to hear her defend herself against the accusations. She couldn't. Clarissa stood in the middle of it all, tears streaming down her face as the truth of her husband's betrayal and her friend's deception crashed over her. I walked to her side and gently took her hand. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "You didn't deserve any of this." She looked at me with such pain in her eyes. Did you know? Did you know what he was doing?" "I discovered it earlier this week," I said honestly, "and I've spent every moment since trying to stop the Thornfields from destroying you both. Desmond made a terrible choice, Clarissa, but you were targeted just as much as he was. Sienna befriended you deliberately as part of their plan." Clarissa turned to look at Sienna, who was now cornered by angry guests demanding explanations. "I trusted her. I thought she was my friend." "I know, and that betrayal is on her and her father, not on you." The party dissolved into chaos after that. Security was called, but not to remove us. Several guests were demanding that the Thornfields be escorted out. Attorneys were discussing filing complaints with the Bar Association. Clients were announcing they would be terminating their relationship with Hartwick and Associates. Jonathan Thornfield's empire was crumbling before his eyes, destroyed by the very public exposure he planned to inflict on Desmond. I found my son standing alone near the windows, staring out at the dark grounds beyond. I approached him carefully, not sure what to say or how he would react. "Mom," he said without turning around, "you saved my life tonight." "I saved you from the Thornfields," I corrected. "But Desmond, you still made choices that hurt people. You still betrayed Clarissa. You still treated me like I was an embarrassment. The Thornfields didn't make you do those things." He finally turned to face me, and I saw tears in his eyes. I know I've been terrible. To you, to Clarissa, to everyone. I got so caught up in success and status and impressing the right people that I forgot who I was. I forgot what really mattered.
Can you find your way back? I asked softly. I don't know, he said honestly, but I want to try. Will you help me? I thought about everything that had happened, all the hurt and betrayal. Part of me wanted to refuse, to tell him he'd made his choices and now he had to live with the consequences alone. But he was still my son, and I was still his mother. Yes, I said, I'll help you. But Desmond, things have to change. The way you treat people, the way you value money and status over relationships, the way you dismissed me from your life because I embarrassed you, all of that has to change. It will, he promised. I swear to you, Mom, it will. 3 months later, I sat in my small apartment with a cup of tea, reflecting on everything that had changed. The Thornfields had been disbarred. The Bar Association had launched a full investigation into their pattern of destruction, and multiple former victims had come forward with testimony. Jonathan Thornfield's firm had collapsed, with partners and attorneys fleeing to other practices. Sienna had left the city entirely, though rumors suggested she was facing criminal charges for fraud in several jurisdictions. Desmond and Clarissa had divorced. It had been painful, but necessary. Clarissa couldn't forgive the affair, and I didn't blame her. She'd moved back to her parents' estate and started the process of rebuilding her life. Desmond had left Hartwick and Associates and joined a smaller firm, one that valued ethics over profit. He was working to rebuild his reputation, one case at a time. And he was in therapy, finally dealing with the issues that had led him to make such destructive choices. He visited me every Sunday now. We had lunch together, and we talked, really talked, in a way we hadn't in years. It would take time to fully heal our relationship, but we were making progress. Patricia knocked on my door, arriving for our weekly tea date. We'd grown even closer through everything that had happened, bonded by our shared mission to expose the truth.
"Did you see the news?" she asked, settling into my worn armchair. "Another one of Thornfield's former victims came forward yesterday, a woman he destroyed 8 years ago. She's filing a lawsuit." "Good," I said firmly. "Every victim deserves justice." Dr. Brennan had published a paper about the Thornfields' pattern of predatory behavior, and it had sent shockwaves through the legal community. Law firms across the country were reviewing their policies and procedures, looking for similar patterns in their own organizations. David Brennan had finally gotten the vindication he'd deserved 4 years ago. Several firms had reached out to him, offering him positions if he wanted to return to practicing law. He was considering it, but taking his time, making sure any firm he joined aligned with his values. As for me, I'd learned something important through all of this. I'd learned that being dismissed and disrespected by my own son, while painful, didn't define my worth. I'd learned that I was strong enough to fight for the truth even when it was difficult. And I'd learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who stand beside you when things get hard. My phone buzzed with a text message from Desmond. "Can I bring dinner over tonight, Mom? I made your favorite pot roast, using your recipe." I smiled and texted back, "I'd like that. Come over at 6. It wasn't perfect. Desmond still had a long way to go in making amends for his mistakes, but he was trying, and that was something. The anniversary party that was supposed to destroy my son instead destroyed his destroyers. The celebration that I'd been banned from attending had become the venue for truth and justice. And the special guest, Dr. Margaret Brennan, had known me after all, in the way that mattered most. She'd known me as a mother fighting for her child. She'd known me as an ally in exposing predators. She'd known me as someone who refused to stay silent in the face of injustice. Sometimes being banned from a party is the best thing that can happen to you, because it forces you to see clearly, to investigate thoroughly, and to fight back fiercely. And sometimes the truth revealed in one night can change everything. Epilogue. I never expected my story to reach so many people. After Dr. Brennan's paper was published, several journalists reached out to interview me. My story of a mother who uncovered a conspiracy to destroy her son became a cautionary tale about predatory behavior in professional environments. But more than that,
It became a story of redemption and second chances, about families broken and slowly rebuilding, about the importance of standing up for what's right even when it's difficult. Clarissa eventually reached out to me 6 months after the divorce was finalized. We met for coffee, and she thanked me for trying to protect her from the Thornfields' cruelty. "I was so angry at you for so long," she admitted. "Angry that you'd discovered Desmond's affair. Angry that you'd brought everything out in public. But I understand now that you saved me from something so much worse. If the Thornfields had succeeded with their plan, I would have been destroyed along with Desmond." We weren't close, but we were cordial. Sometimes that's the best you can hope for after such betrayal. As for the question I posed at the beginning of my story, asking what you would do in my situation, I received thousands of responses. Some people said they would have confronted their son privately. Others said they would have let him face the consequences of his choices alone. Many said they would have done exactly what I did, fighting to expose the truth and protect their child from predators, even when that child had made terrible mistakes. There's no single right answer. Every family, every situation is different. But I learned that sometimes love means fighting for someone even when they don't deserve it. Sometimes it means exposing ugly truths, even when it would be easier to stay silent. And sometimes it means standing in a room where you're not wanted, refusing to leave, because you know something important is about to happen and someone needs to be there to stop it. The Thornfields taught me something valuable, though I doubt they intended to. They taught me that evil often hides behind polished surfaces and sophisticated manners, that cruelty can wear expensive clothes and speak with educated accents, that the most dangerous predators are often the ones who appear most respectable. But they also taught me something else, that ordinary people working together and refusing to be silent can defeat even the most powerful predators. That truth, when spoken loudly enough and supported by evidence, cannot be suppressed. That justice, though delayed, can still arrive. A year after that fateful anniversary party, I attended another celebration. This one was at a community center in Riverside, my old neighborhood. It was a gathering of all the people who had been affected by the Thornfields' destruction, coming together not in sadness, but in solidarity and healing. David Brennan was there with his mother, both of them smiling and at peace in a way they hadn't been in years. Patricia stood beside me, still my closest friend and partner in all things. Other victims of the Thornfields attended as well, people I'd never met before, but who felt like family because we'd all survived the same predator. And in the corner, somewhat apart from the others, but present nonetheless, stood Desmond. He asked if he could attend to hear the stories of other victims, to understand the full scope of what had almost happened to him, to see the faces of people who hadn't been as lucky, who hadn't had a mother willing to fight for them.
When it was my turn to speak, I looked around at all these people who had been broken and were now healing. I thought about how close we'd all come to losing everything. And I felt grateful, not for the pain or the betrayal, but for the strength we'd all discovered within ourselves. "My name is Eleanor Hartwell," I said to the room, "and I'm the mother who crashed her son's anniversary party to expose a conspiracy. Some people called me a hero after that night, but I'm not a hero. I'm just a mother who refused to let her son be destroyed without a fight. I'm just a woman who got angry enough at injustice to do something about it." I paused, looking at Desmond. My son made terrible choices. He betrayed his wife, he betrayed my trust, and he almost threw away everything good in his life chasing status and success. The Thornfields didn't make him do those things, but they did try to use those mistakes to destroy him completely and publicly, to make an example of him the way they'd made examples of so many others. What I learned through all of this, I continued, is that we can't always save people from the consequences of their own choices. Desmond lost his marriage. He lost his position at a prestigious firm. He lost friendships and opportunities. Those losses are on him, and he has to live with them. But what we can do is make sure that people aren't destroyed beyond all hope of redemption. We can make sure that predators don't get to annihilate lives for sport. We can make sure that there's still a chance for healing and change and growth.
The room was silent as I finished speaking. Then, slowly, people began to applaud. Not for me specifically, but for all of us. For surviving, for speaking up, for refusing to be silent victims. After the gathering ended, Desmond approached me hesitantly. "Thank you for what you said, Mom, about consequences and redemption. I meant every word. You made your own choices, Desmond, but you also deserve the chance to learn from them and become better. That's all any of us can hope for." He nodded, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I'm trying, Mom. Every day I'm trying to be the person you raised me to be, the person Dad would have been proud of." I touched his cheek gently, the way I used to when he was a little boy. "Your father would have been disappointed in your choices, but he also would have believed in your ability to change, just like I do." As I drove home that evening with Patricia beside me, I reflected on how strange life could be. A year ago, I'd been a dismissed and disrespected mother, banned from her own son's anniversary party, crying alone in my apartment, and wondering how everything had gone so wrong. Now I was a woman who had exposed a conspiracy, saved multiple people from destruction, and helped her son find a path toward redemption. I was someone who had discovered reserves of strength and courage she hadn't known she possessed. "Do you ever regret it?" Patricia asked as we drove through the familiar streets of Riverside. "Going to that party, exposing everything so publicly? It would have been easier to just walk away, let Desmond face whatever was coming." I thought about it for a moment. "No," I said finally. "I don't regret it. Not because everything turned out perfectly, because it didn't. Clarissa is still hurt, Desmond is still dealing with the consequences of his choices, and I'm still processing the pain of how he treated me. But I don't regret fighting for the truth. I don't regret refusing to let predators win." "You know what I think?" Patricia said. "I think you've always been this strong. You raised Desmond alone after Jerome died. You worked 3 jobs to put him through school. You survived poverty and grief and loneliness. The Thornfields didn't create your strength, Eleanor. They just gave you a reason to show it." Her words settled over me like a warm blanket. She was right. I had always been strong. I'd just forgotten it for a while, let myself believe my son's assessment that I was an embarrassment, someone to be hidden away and dismissed. But I wasn't an embarrassment. I was Eleanor Hartwell. I was a mother, a friend, a survivor, and a fighter. And no one, not even my own son, had the right to make me feel less than that. 2 years after the anniversary party that changed everything, I received an unexpected phone call. It was from a lawyer representing a class action lawsuit against Jonathan Thornfield and his former firm. Multiple victims had banded together to seek financial compensation for the damage done to their careers and lives. "Mrs. Hartwell," the lawyer said, "your testimony and evidence were crucial in building this case. Because of your willingness to speak up, we've been able to hold the Thornfields accountable in a way that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. On behalf of all the victims, I want to thank you." The lawsuit eventually resulted in a multi-million-dollar settlement. Each victim received compensation for their losses, and more importantly, they received public vindication. The legal community now knew exactly what the Thornfields had done, and similar predators were being watched more carefully. I didn't need the money from the settlement, so I donated my portion to a foundation that supported victims of workplace harassment and abuse. It felt right to turn something so painful into something that could help others. Desmond continued his slow process of rebuilding. He'd been in therapy for 2 years, working through the issues that had led him to value success over integrity. He'd apologized to Clarissa multiple times, though she'd made it clear she would never take him back. He'd apologized to me as well, and slowly, painfully, we were rebuilding our relationship. He would never again be the rising star attorney at a prestigious firm. That path was closed to him now, but he'd found something potentially more valuable, a sense of purpose beyond just personal success. He'd started volunteering with legal aid organizations, using his skills to help people who couldn't afford expensive attorneys. He'd started mentoring young lawyers, warning them about the dangers of sacrificing integrity for advancement. "I'll never get back what I lost," he told me one Sunday over lunch at my apartment. my marriage, my reputation, the career I thought I'd have. But Mom, I'm not sure I want those things back anymore. The person I was when I had them, the person who banned his own mother from his anniversary party because she embarrassed him, I don't want to be that person ever again. Who do you want to be? I asked. He thought for a long moment. I want to be someone Dad would have been proud of. Someone who uses his privileges and talents to help people, not just to climb higher. Someone who values relationships over status. Someone like you, Mom. I felt tears spring to my eyes. I'm not perfect, Desmond. I made plenty of mistakes raising you. But you never stopped fighting for what was right, he said. Even when it cost you. Even when it meant standing in a room full of people who didn't want you there. Even when it meant exposing ugly truths about your own son. You fought for justice and truth, and that's who I want to be. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Desmond would carry the consequences of his choices for the rest of his life. Clarissa would carry the scars of betrayal. The Thornfields' victims would never get back the years they lost to depression and destroyed careers. But it was an honest ending, a real ending, one where people faced consequences, learned from mistakes, and slowly, painfully, found ways to move forward. As for me, I discovered something important in my 70s that I wish I'd known decades earlier. Your worth is not determined by how others treat you, not by whether your son is proud to have you at his parties, not by whether you wear designer clothes or live in an expensive neighborhood, not by whether you're considered sophisticated enough for certain social circles. Your worth is determined by how you respond when faced with injustice, by whether you stand up for what is right, even when it's difficult, by whether you fight for truth, even when lies would be easier, by whether you protect the vulnerable, even when the powerful tried to destroy them. I was banned from my son's anniversary party because I was considered an embarrassment, a working-class woman with outdated clothes and embarrassing stories about the old neighborhood. But the special guest at that party, Dr. Margaret Brennan, already knew me, not because we'd met before, but because she recognized me for what I truly was, a mother willing to fight, an ally in exposing predators, a woman who refused to be silenced. And in the end, that recognition mattered more than any fancy invitation ever could. So, to answer the question I posed at the beginning of this story, what would you do in my situation? I hope you would do exactly what I did. I hope you would investigate when things didn't add up. I hope you would gather evidence when you suspected wrongdoing. I hope you would build alliances with others who'd been victimized. And I hope you would show up, uninvited if necessary, to make sure that truth prevailed over cruelty. Because sometimes being banned from the party means you're exactly the person who needs to be there. Thank you for following my story to the end. Thank you for listening as I shared the most painful and triumphant period of my life. And thank you for commenting your city and letting me know how far this story has reached. May you all have the courage to fight for truth when it matters. May you all have the strength to stand up against injustice even when you're standing alone. And may you all remember that your worth is not determined by those who try to diminish you, but how you respond when faced with difficult choices. I'm Eleanor Hartwell. I'm 72 years old now. I live in a small apartment in Riverside. I shop at discount stores and tell long stories about the old days. And I'm the woman who crashed an anniversary party to expose a conspiracy and save lives. And I wouldn't change a single thing.